everybody can move up because we don't have the access to the technology to make that a better thing. And there's at least 6 chairs in the front row too. So if you do have any cards and you want to pass them up and you can wave them at me, I can grab them while they're introducing themselves as well. All right?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Lori Renstra, and I am one of maybe 3 to 5 end-of-life doulas here in the Grand Valley. And if you have questions about what an end-of-life doula is, I can go into that later. But in the meantime, I did put business cards over on the side. Feel free to pick one up and give me a call. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Kosanke, and my husband underwent medical aid in dying in October.
A little closer.
My husband underwent medical aid in dying in October, and my name is Bonnie Kosanke, and I can answer some questions if you'd like.
You know me already.
Hello everyone, my name is Ellen Friedman, and since I've been called to learn more about end-of-life options in Colorado and just end-of-life in general, I've noticed that I've been living a more fulfilling life, and I'm really here to support people in living a more fulfilled life and being comfortable with end-of-life options for themselves and others, and really committed to educating people. I've been blessed to companion 2 people through the process, one in creating end-of-life ritual for herself, and who, when all the details, was someone that was completely unbiased, had no agenda, and it was just a real gift for me. And then also someone who began the process and lost mental capacity to complete the process, and honoring that was his journey, but learning from that the process, from the time you decide to say, I want to do this, can take up to 30 days, and that after you say yes, you never have to, like Barbara said, you never have to complete. So to me, that's really important information to share.
Hi everybody, my name is Kevin Watt. I'm a board certified chaplain that works with the local hospice at Hope West, representing only myself though, and also a spiritual counselor and somebody that teaches people often about working with grief and death and trying to incorporate intention and love into whatever their wishes are. I also co-teach a online class called Befriending Death. And it's a really great place where in all of these different sort of avenues, I've seen people really find incredible peace simply by setting an intention, by knowing what do they want, regardless of what they choose. So happy to share my experiences. Person. So I really view that if the chaplain is there with you, helping you to find what you care about, what you need, and then connecting you with resources, I think that they've done, good work there.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask Tom? So, in your hospice role, as I'm putting you on the spot, is there any prohibition against you being present during a medical aid in dying death?
So I can answer, yeah. Okay. So my understanding of our policy is that we kind of fall into that middle range where we can't be mixing the medication, but we can provide information. I can be there while you're thinking it through, while you're considering, gosh, that interview where I had to ask for it was incredibly hard, and then we can counsel on that, and we can be there with you while you are dying. And so, and luckily I never mix any medication, so it's a particularly simple policy. Yeah.
Okay, this is a local question. So if somebody, for instance, in Moab gets healthcare in Grand Junction, would that make them eligible for medical aid in dying, presumably here in Grand Junction?
Well, it depends. So the statute, I don't know if there are any attorneys in the audience. the statute is really kind of weird. It lays out what it means to be a resident in Colorado. Now, you might think, well, that's obvious, I live here. You have to show that you have a lease, driver's license, property as evidenced by, you know, tax or utility bills or stuff like that. There's a whole list of things that we have to look at as the physician to say, oh yeah, this will settle as being a resident. So the person in Moab, if they have a condo in Silverthorne for skiing, that counts, right, if they own property. So it's a little bit fungible, as they say. If they only live in Moab, don't have a lease in Colorado, Grand Junction, and don't have any of those other things, then right now, that's prohibited. That is one part of the law that's being addressed right now. Unclear how the legislators feel about that. They were a little worried about Colorado becoming a death and dying state, destination state for dying. I mean, this is hard for me to imagine, but so I would say it's a work in progress, and other states have gotten rid of the residency. But we have some strange examples. I had a patient who did have a condo in Silverthorne, actually was from Wisconsin, but they actually lived in Colorado quite a bit. They were here most of ski season. That seemed kind of kosher to me. So that was fine. I had another client that met the letter of the law, but when I tell you this, you probably think, wow, that's pretty weird. They had a property also in Summit as a rental property. They never went there. They never stayed there. And in fact wanted the death to be at somewhere in Denver, but they met the rule because they owned this property. So it shows how this stuff gets twisted in many different ways. And I'll tell you, as a physician trying to follow the rules, I just try to stay in the middle lane and do the best I can for folks. And that's what we can do. I have a current client who has family in Denver with a home. The family has a home. Patient's been living in Arizona for a long time with a very devastating situation. They're actually going to be moving back to Denver to make use of medical aid dying. So we're seeing like all variations on a theme. Did you have a question?
Okay, so we heard about the role of spiritual chaplain. What is maybe the contrasting role of a death doula, or how does that complete the care team?
I'll tackle that one and then pass it along to Dr. Morris for a little bit of follow-up. So as far as an end-of-life doula, I see myself as a support for the family and the patient, of course, but the family probably even more so. I can be there, I can sit, I can coordinate shifts if there's time involved that, like through an end-of-life vigil plan. As an end-of-life doula, I'd like to connect with the family during the palliative care phase to be able to really develop relationship with all of the family and the patient, while they're still cognitively able to respond and provide their insights into how they want their end of life to look. I think that's really important, and that's through education and those insights is how I landed in this field. So as sitting at bedside would be one way I could support the family while this process is going through, myself or my colleagues.
Yeah, I think it's important for families and really the patients that should be in the driver's seat a lot to figure out what that care team, what the team needs to look like. And I think often there are many situations where having a doula just helps with all of these other things. I mean, I've heard doulas say, well, I wash the dishes, and that sounds funny, or I stop at the store. pick up some food or, go to the pharmacy. So I think doulas have more than maybe the rest of us, a much broader role in a lot of ways, if they're flexible and are willing to do things like that, in understanding that sitting at the bedside and doing all these things in the home are really important. So I think it's a compliment. The other time, I think it's really important as we hopefully get more doulas experience specifically in medical aid and dying, which we're starting to see, is I hope I mentioned that I do try to attend deaths when possible for my patients, but with this increase in virtual care, that's not always possible. And I think it's, particularly if the hospice nurse is not in the room or can only be in the other room or anything like that, it's really important for the family and the patient to have someone there to help in case anything strange happens, in case there are questions. If I can't physically be there, or for some reason the family doesn't want me there, I'm at least on speed dial. But that may not be enough for the immediate, was that movement, was that supposed to happen, kind of stuff. So I think there's increasing role for doulas in that kind of specialized way, because as we see increase in access across the state, we probably see decrease in how many times the doctor can actually be there. So you might ask me what I did for 9 hours most recently. It's a hard one. It's a hard one for any of us. I had planned to be with this family, but 9 hours is a long time. And I actually had to leave for a while for many reasons, which you could probably imagine, and then come back. So this notion that there's, as with anything else, it takes a village, and everybody could feel supported. The family left for a while, the friends left for a while, we kind of, because this is emotionally extremely difficult.
The other thing that I want to add for any of us is sometimes in families, everyone's not on board at the same time. And that can cause a lot of stress on the person that's dying. It can cause stress on relationships within the family. And what's been helpful for me is to point everyone to honoring the person's wishes. Not our own wishes. We get to decide what we want to do, how we want to do it, but really honoring, valuing, and having the emphasis on the person that's dying, how all the details for them.
I should have known you would say something wonderful, because that's exactly where I was going to go with. I'm a huge fan of doulas. I advocate for them constantly because I think the service that you provide is this loving, holding space, this persistent presence where ideas and needs can be expressed. People hear and are encouraged by your non-anxious presence. And my wife does work as a normal doula. She works with folks who have had birth trauma. And in that same circumstance, that advocate for the mom who can speak to, I was there 6 weeks back when somebody said this, and I know that it's important, can make all the difference. So I would say, if you're considering it, getting that doula early, or speaking with anybody, be it a faith leader, a counselor, just to begin to process, what do I want? How does it look? How does it smell? How does it feel? Who's there? Will really lead to great outcomes. And so, yeah, keep up that great work.
Coming over.
What about training or licensure, if I can speak it? What qualifies you as a doula?
Kind of a funny backstory for me. I'm a long-term social worker. I retired from the county as a social worker in 2019, working with littles, with kids in child welfare. And I knew for sure that I wasn't done working, but I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like. And ended up working for about 1.5 years in long-term care as a social work assistant. And I just loved the population. And thought, okay, I'm onto something. went back to school during COVID, went back to school and got my certification in gerontology. And then during that schooling, I discovered this concept called end-of-life doula. Oh, so that's where I learned about it, and through the International End-of-Life Doula Association, I took the classes and became an end-of-life doula. So that's kind of the long story of how it became, where actually there is no certification for a doula, and that might be where you were after. I know that there's some conversation around that, but there is no current that I'm aware of certification. I'm also part of the Colorado End-of-Life, CEOLC, Colorado End-of-Life Collaborative, there we go. And so I'm connected with a team of doulas, and one of which has taken me under her wing when I was initially approached about being an end-of-life doula for a family that was pursuing the MAID process. I'd not been through it and had someone to bounce my thoughts and worries, and so I appreciate the collaboration that the collaborative has offered for me. Does that answer your question?
It does.
You're welcome.
All right, we got a couple more. So one from the community is, how does dementia affect medical aid in dying? Proof of decisional incapacity is underlined, emphasized.
Yes.
I was waiting, I've been waiting. This is a hot topic in Durango. Okay. I shouldn't be laughing, except there's so much conversation about this nationally. So our statute, as I think every state and jurisdiction in the U.S., excludes medical aid in dying for persons who don't have decisional capacity. And so when we use the word dementia, which is very broad and needs to be delved into more, it generally excludes persons with dementia. There's several reasons why. One is the decisional capacity issue. The other is, this will be a mind blower, but is dementia a terminal diagnosis? Again, this has to do with the art and science of medicine. Usually by the time I would refer a patient, which I have many, with dementia for hospice care, they are in the last, if any of you know the fast stages of dementia, which are the staging, stages 6 and 7. Those are the stages where patients can't recognize any family members, they may not know their name, they usually can't feed themselves, they can't care for themselves. So even though dementia can be a terminal diagnosis, I would say, in this setting, by the time it qualifies as a terminal diagnosis, decisional capacity is pretty clearly not there. So what does that mean? Because many of us think about and talk about what our wishes would be as we might face severe cognitive impairment. And we throw around a lot of words like, I wouldn't want to be that way. If I can't recognize my daughter, I'm done. We all say all this kind of stuff, but we really have to get into the meaning of it. And so there's been a lot of movement now to say, what can persons who have a dementing illness do if they feel like they've gotten to the point where their quality of life is just not enough for them. And this is often where VSED comes in. Because persons with cognitive impairment can use VSED. There's no prohibition against that, although it's difficult, as we mentioned. And there's been a lot of work in the area of advanced care planning for persons with cognitive impairment. So I'm looking at the recording here. You may have seen some of these where people not only write out their wishes, if I get to this point where I can't recognize this and this is what I want. And now there's a lot of work on using video to express our wishes. But we don't have yet, and may never have, an option in the U.S. for medical aid in dying in that situation. So what's a person to do? You might have read Judy Blume's book or seen some of the other literature on this. You know, there are options in other countries. Speaking of residency, some people fly to Europe, to Switzerland in particular, where patients with dementia can be treated, taken care of. These are big, big picture decisions. But to answer kind of the immediate one, right now, if dementia is the diagnosis and the person is already advanced to not having decisional capacity, medically aided dying is not an option. I would remind you though, because this gets very confusing, many of us, many of our patients don't have only one diagnosis, right? So we could have metastatic stomach cancer and mild cognitive impairment, okay? Now that person could potentially be appropriate for medical aid in dying if their cognitive impairment is not so severe, right? And it's not their terminal diagnosis, their cancer is their terminal diagnosis. So people get really like confused about that. Oh, that patient can't use medical aid in dying, they have cognitive impairment. Well, wait a minute. No, maybe they can. So it gets kind of mushy. And the last thing on a Saturday afternoon I'll ask you to think about over the weekend is something a colleague of mine and I have discussed for years, which is, can the non-demented person really predict and make decisions for the future demented person? I see someone smiling in the back. Think about that tonight when you're falling asleep. It's a rough one.
So that's
What do you want?
I want to be able to, when being of sound mind and body, to be able to state my wishes and have them honored at the time that, I do become blah, 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 blah.
See, you need a video of that. Okay.
I just came across a incredible addendum for advanced directives that specifically addresses dementia. In what you said, but very specific thing, if this, and you check the box, which ones. And I'm happy to share that with you. You can get my card, the purple house over there, and email me, I'll send it, or I'll send it to everyone on the list, however. But I was really happy to see.
Good to know.
Yeah, I was really happy to see that as like a formal document addendum.
In this context, because Ellen and I just helped a friend with this, can you tell the people who maybe don't know, there were like 3 questions that the patient has to answer as part of the evaluation?
Well, for medically aid in dying, you mean?
Well,
Yes,
So-
for medical aid and diet.
So this person's provider, he did telemedicine, and this person's provider had 3 questions. I don't know if those are the universal 3 questions.
Okay.
Like what I heard from Barbara is that the physician has to determine all these different things. But can I share the question? I mean,
Sure, go ahead.
So the questions were, why do you want medical aid in dying? Who wants you to have this in order to prove that it's yours and only your decision? And the 3rd question was, what happens when you take the medicine? And he said, I have a peaceful death. Yeah.
And that's why I added the question, is there proof of decisional incapacity required?
So that was all that this provider required. She said, I don't need to know if he can tell me what he had for breakfast, when he had the last
Who cares?
medication.
Right.
None of that matters. This is your.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't, I said who cares? This will show my age for those folks who work in assisted living and nursing homes. We used to walk around and say, hey, Ellen, what day is today? Hey, Ellen, who's the president? who cares? Like, hey, Ellen, whatever. And, we thought that was very important. That was reality therapy. I don't know what it was called. It was really
Useless.
It was useless. And, well, it was worse than useless. It made people upset, giving everybody a test every day. Seriously, that's bad. We try not to do that anymore, although sometimes we have to do that in the medical setting just to assess, but it's not useful otherwise. So the point that everybody is getting at is we want to assess for decisional capacity about that decision, all right? And so that's what's very important. Now, there
And
are
that's very
some
different.
tools. It's
That's
very
very
different.
different.
There are some tools that nationally can be used, like to assess capacity. I don't happen to use them, but I do believe we have to know that the person needs to know their diagnosis, that they need to know their prognosis, that they need to, we need to say, well, is there anything else you could do? Are there any other, what are the other options? And someone might say, well, you could keep torturing me, like, you could keep making me have chemotherapy. That's an answer, or a legitimate answer. They have to, I don't ask the question like, who is this for? I just ask in a different way to make sure there's no coercion. And then I say to patients, we've been through this long thing, and I'll say, look, I know this sounds funny, but I have to ask you this question, and you have to answer it. And I say, what will be the result of you taking this medication? All right? Now, I've had some quite amusing answers, like, see ya, stuff like that. So at least there is humor at the end of life, and those of you who've been at the bedside know that humor is a powerful tool. So this decisional capacity thing, I think, is important. And then I'll put in my 2 cents for those of you who do work in long-term care or assisted living, which is the opposite, which we used to call everyday ethics. So maybe someone doesn't have a clue that they have a terrible heart, or that they might be dying, or that they better do something at their retirement account, but they sure as heck know whether they want French toast or eggs for breakfast. So the other works as well, right? It's all about situation-based, and we should respect that. We should respect that this person can't make a financial decision, but should be encouraged and have the right to know what they want for breakfast, or what they want to wear, or whether they want to be with another person or not. So that question goes both ways.
Yes, please. So if a person has been diagnosed with dementia and they say they want to die, can they? Do they need to find a physician then who will say, yes, this is a terminal diagnosis and therefore yes? Or how does that proceed?
Prediction on the first 2 words Barbara's about to say.
No, this is extremely difficult. First of all, because the diagnosis of dementia can be so difficult. So and you said, can they die and do they need a doctor? Well, the answer is yes. That person can do the VSED process, which does not require a doctor, actually. Well, there's a subscript to that. And so that's the process I know of. There are other illegal processes. Well, we've made them illegal in the United States. Suicide by violent methods, which, by the way, we have experienced, or you may have in your community, where people say, well, okay, I can't do medical aid in dying. VSED's going to take too long, and so I'm going to take a gun, and shoot myself. And now that obviously is not what any of us want to come home to, and we try to avoid that. So the options for patients with dementia, if they don't have another diagnosis, are to consider voluntary stopping of eating and drinking, usually with the help of a care team. You don't have to have a care team, but it works a lot better because you need support of hospice towards the end. Can you hear? I'm sorry. And that's the main way. Or you go to another country where medications can be used. Those are, I see heads nodding, those are, in the United States, our choices. And, I shouldn't come across as negative about VSED, because in the right setting, it can be done quite well. But it's difficult. And we have to have a hospice team that's really all in, I think. you know, for it to go on.
I want to share a personal experience that I had exactly a year ago, well, 2.5 years ago, when I moved my mom here to Grand Junction with dementia. I walked into the doctor and said, "We are going to be on the palliative care program. Will you support?" So we're not gonna look at any of her old diagnoses. We're not gonna work anything up. We're gonna treat for comfort and caring instead of curing. So when pneumonia, UTI, bladder infections, anything came up, it was purely comfort. And in that, my mom, who never identified with having dementia because the idea of that would have killed her, she died before she lost knowledge of or memory of who I was or who any of her family was. She never needed assistance cleaning herself, and she had 26 hours in the care center at Hope West. And it was really an honorable thing to support her in what I knew would be her wishes. So that's how you do it. You provide care and comfort. And there are lots of physicians in this town that support that.
Another question about that.
I'm sorry.
Calling down, where we go?
I'm a hospice social worker here in Grand Junction, and just wanted to make sure, as social workers do, that you cover all these bases. The reason you have a hospice involved is because of what happens after the death, to avoid having law enforcement and complications around pronouncing, correct?
Well, it's one of the reasons.
That's one of the reasons, but it's a,
Important.
yeah, you don't want this to be
Right.
chaos for the family members afterwards. Having a hospice team that is able to understand and support is amazing and wonderful, I hope. And the other part is the family members, and especially for NSAID, or however you say it. NSAID, anyway, it's that person that's your caregiver, your family member, that has to know. They have to be fully supportive of that process, what you talked about with your mother. If you were not that aware of all those parameters of UTIs and pneumonia, you're the one making those, your medical power of attorney and your family decision makers with you are the primaries that have to be on board with you. So that's the pre-work you have to do.
Thank you for your service in our community.
Interjections are welcome. We'll round it up to the last two questions, so just raise a hand. I think there was a couple of moments where we touched on personal experiences and family members. There's a few witnesses for the care team, but is anyone on the panel comfortable telling a member with either just different choices at end of life or medical aid in dying? Anybody that would be comfortable sharing?
So another little tidbit of backstory for me. My dad passed away in 1989. I was in my early-ish 30s. And we really didn't understand hospice. I'm not even real sure hospice was a thing back then, to be honest. He went into a nursing home just 5 days prior to his death, and I, as the only child, I actually knew nothing about his experiences or wishes, and he had Alzheimer's disease. So, you know, he really had declined. Lots of backstory in there I won't go into. But his passing left me wondering, how would he have liked to have been remembered? And what would he have liked his final days to look like? I had no idea, and still don't know all these years later. My mom passed away in 2015. I was not there for her passing. I was there for my dad's. that was her one wish, is that I be there, and I wasn't. She's in Ohio, I was here, anyways. But the hospice team in where she was, she finally agreed to go into hospice. They called to tell me she was transitioning, no longer able to communicate. And I asked them at that point, it was like midnight our time when they called me, and I said, let me talk to her. And they said, no, she won't be able to respond. And I'm like, okay, and let it go. And I come to find out later in these classes that I'm taking or have taken and continue to take, that she probably would have still heard me, as hearing is the last sense, or one of the last senses to go. And I got angry. Guys, I got angry because it's like I couldn't be there. There was no way physically to get on an airplane and get to Ohio in time for her passing. Just couldn't pull it off. But I could have maybe helped walk her through. And it breaks my heart that particular team didn't understand that. And so for me, education is so important. Guys, it's so important. That's why I honor my parents by volunteering at Hope West. I honor my parents by doing my end-of-life doula work, because now I understand. I don't have all the answers by any means, but I understand what it's about. And I don't want other families to have to leave questioning the same thing that I now know. I don't know if that answered the question, but I just wanted to share that. Hopefully it answered, but I just wanted to share that. Just so important, guys. Listen to I have a lot of regrets not having, when I was little, of course, he was much older, so I was just a kid and didn't really care. But my mother was really intact all the way to the end. Cognitively, which is quite amazing at 92 to still be really darn sharp. Slipping, yeah, but I kind of sloughed it off. Whatever. And now it's like, what I missed. I don't want other families to have to think and experience that. That's a loss on my end. So, whatever we can do as a team to help support your families in the process, please ask. And ask. That's a big deal. Ask questions. Demand answers. And if they say no, that might be the final answer, but seek other opinions until you know that the answer is the one you needed to hear. Anybody else?
Yeah, Ken had a difficult time in the fact that the wait, the 15 days was extremely long. And on top of that, we originally talked to Dr. Morse, I think it was on a Wednesday, and he said, well, I want to think about it a little bit. And he later told me that was one of the worst decisions of his life. He should have said yes then, because it wasn't until the following Monday that we called and made the appointment and got the process started. But 15 days, once you have committed yourself to this, is a very, very long time. And Ken actually declined a lot during those 15 days. He initially was able to, get around, walk, and by the time he was in hospice, he got to the point where he told me one day he barely had the strength to raise his arms enough to feed himself. I think some of it is mental, that, you have made the decision, I'm out of here. But you've got to wait, you gotta wait. And 15 days, doesn't seem like a long time unless you're just in agony.
That's a perfect opening, and thank you, thank you for letting me share in the journey with Ken. It's an opening for something Ellen asked me to say another word about, which is what's going on with the state bill for the amendments on the statute. I was kind of general about that, but one of the big things is decreasing the waiting time. we are trying to get it decreased actually to 48 hours. There's some pushback, I'll tell you, I learned this yesterday, from the legislatures to make it 7 instead of 15. I mean, 7 would still be better, but not great. So if you feel like writing to your representatives and senators, this would be a good time. The hearing for the bill is on February 28th. And if that's something you're interested in, it wasn't really the topic for today, but if you're interested in that kind of thing, the big things are adding nurse practitioners, decreasing the waiting time. There's some language about making sure that hospitals and hospices put on their websites whether they support medical aid in dying or not, which I personally think is important. Most health systems have buried it in the patient consent to treat, which if you've been any place lately, you don't even see. A clerk puts a little electronic thing in your face and you sign your name, right? Who's done that? Me? Okay. So, the consent to treat is not a great place for anything. So this would move it so that they have to, if they're opting out, they have to put it on their website. And then there's a few other changes. I don't know how many of these will go through. The residency one, which there's a lot of anxiety about. So if you're interested in that, there's more information, and we can get that to you also if you want to know more about what's going on with that. Other questions, or are we good?
May I share something?
Sure.
I just wanted to say, so I've worked with a few people through my private practice who were considering this question. And to a T, every one of them said that the very act of thinking through what do I want and would I do this, and sometimes actually writing it out was incredibly helpful. And somebody who became a very dear friend, when they went through this process, they hand wrote out just a little poem and had it in their hands while they died, that their family now just consider an heirloom. And if it's okay, we'll take just 1 minute. But this is the poem. It's a blessing for death from John O'Donohue. From the moment you were born, your death has walked beside you. Though it seldom shows its face, you still feel its empty touch when fear invades your life, or what you love is lost, or inner damage is incurred. Yet when destiny draws you into these spaces of poverty and your heart stays generous until some door opens into light, you are quietly befriending your death, so that you will have no need to fear when your time comes to turn and leave. That the silent presence of your death would call your life to attention, wake you up to how scarce your time is and to the urgency to become free and equal to the call of your destiny, that you would gather yourself and decide carefully how you now can live that life that you would love to look back on from your deathbed.
The greatest gift that we can leave behind is our wishes.
That was awesome. Any last moments to open the floor for anybody that has last questions before we kind of do closing? Awesome. So just going to pass it down the line, and if people grab your card, what can they use it for? And just closing statements. Closing statements in general.
That's a great one.
What can you use my business card for? I was just suggesting maybe a bookmark. I'm here, I'm Alpenglow End of Life Resource and Support. Business cards are on the white table over there. If you have questions, I'm happy to stick around and chat with you. Something that would be really good to pray for into the future is that insurance chooses to bring end-of-life doulas into their payment mode, because as of right now, it's all private pay, and I operate with quite a generous sliding scale, promise. Probably way more generous than it ought to be. And am happy to meet with you independently, and I'm just glad you guys are here. It's good to know what's available to us. I think a secondary conversation might be burial options. We didn't talk about those. I'd be interested if Dr. Morris or one of your colleagues would come over and share about all the different burial options, shy of maybe the ones that have been in the news of late, but yeah, it's not probably a great option. But I think that would be another good conversation for our community, and to have conversation around end-of-life topics. It's a taboo topic, and it's really, really important to start. I mean, we're all going to be there at one point or another, and it's important to normalize the conversation. It's not weird, it's normal. I mean, it's part of who we're to become. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
If you want to cheap out, you can do like my husband did, and I've signed up for, and that is you can donate your body to science. Ken was a scientist, and that's what he wanted to do. And so, you know, the mortuary picked his body up and shipped it off.
I was laughing because next week I'm doing a session with someone from one of the funeral homes in Denver, and it's called Mythbusters, the Death Edition. So if you'd like us to bring that here sometime, we will. But it kind of goes through a lot of myths about medical aid and dying, and a lot of information about a variety of options after you die. I just want to thank everyone for being here, and again, all the folks who helped us. Anne is holding up the piece of paper. If you want to put your name and email, we appreciate that. I have too many business cards, so I'll just talk about, if you were going to take two of them, I only have one of them out there. The one out there is in my role as president of End of Life Options Colorado. I told someone who interviewed me about a year ago, I said, well, you know, medical aid and dying is really not my gig. And she laughed and she said, well, it kind of seems to be. And you know, what that's about for me is that I got into this world not as a political activist or anything, but through my work as a primary care geriatrician. And so that's what I meant when I said, hey, this is not my gig, because it grew out of my role in caring for older adults as they went through all sorts of milestones and end of life, and medical aid dying was just kind of part of that. And so I bring us back to the beginning where I said there are options, and my hope is that if you feel upset or frustrated and your local community doesn't have the resources or information, you know, please contact us. We don't know everyone, but we're knowing more and more people. And what I say to people when I get these really panicky calls is, we can help you. And it may not necessarily be me, but we can help you. I'm quite sure of that. So that's what my second card is, which I didn't bring, which is my small consulting business. So there are situations in which I'm honored to help individual patients and families outside of my role in the organization when that seems to be the best match.
Thank you so much for coming here. It's been just a dream of mine to learn more, and I learned more today with you. And my little purple house over there is my card, and I guide people home to the source of peace and well-being within while they're living, in their dying process, and everything in between. And my husband, Jerry, and I are very educated in all the burial options, the green burial options. So we might just be able to do that. And we'll invite you if you want, but we might just be able to do that locally if there's an interest for that. I'm also really interested in exploring ethical wills. What's the legacy you want to leave behind?
Yes. Indeed.
That's wonderful.
Indeed.
I'll just say, I think you all are on a phenomenal course. Just being willing to think about this now is the biggest determinant that I see of if somebody has a death that they are proud of, that they're happy with. So I would encourage you, I think I brought some of the Hope West brochures, some for the volunteer program, but you know, look at the program, start thinking now. I mean, what's amazing is most people, they never ask, who would I want to work with? So go online, they have care scores that you can see, oh, this agency is ranked here, or this agency offers this, and this is so crucial. So just, if you start that now, you're ahead of 99% of those who just don't articulate it. And so, yeah, that brochure is there. I also brought a few of my spiritual counseling things, but find somebody that you can talk to about wills, about your wishes, because that'll lead to a very dignified and good death. Yeah. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please take as many cups and food as you would
Yeah,
like.
take-